Okay, so I've been informed of the patient that has just arrived. This is about AI copyrights. And from what I understand, the patient presents with creator and copyright stealing. AI is copying information without duly rewarding the creators themselves. So for today, just based on the way the patient presents, I really do think this is going to be a little messy. And as we go and investigate and do an autopsy on this particular patient, one of the things you want to bring is gloves, right? Because you don't want to get dirty as we're looking at it. So obviously, the patient would appreciate if the gloves matched, but due to budget reductions, this is what we've got. But it's okay. It will get us the job done. Let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Today's patient, AI copyright infringement, is not AI. It's everyone else. Well, every institution that stands to lose money because of AI. And after reviewing the evidence, it appears to me the pathology appears surprisingly consistent across universities, publishers, copyright institutions, and governance ecosystems. The patient appears to be suffering from what I would describe as acute ontological confusion triggered by synthetic cognition acceleration. Now, if that wasn't complicated enough, let's begin the autopsy and examine. So the public narrative says AI is stealing. They're copying books. They're scraping the internet. AI is copying. AI is fundamentally different from human learning. At first glance, this appears to be about protecting creators, the small, lowly human creators that are outputting things on there into social media, and AI scraping it and using it for its own benefit. But when we open the body and inspect the connective tissue underneath the language, something else becomes visible. AI did not fundamentally change the meaning and ontology of learning itself. It changed the scale of synthesis. And that distinction matters because if you take a human being consumes books. We attend seminars, we study copyrighted material that's available in a copyright database. We read the internet, we read articles, we consume frameworks, we reinterpret information through our own perception, our own experiences, our own culture, and our own cognition. Then we synthesize it into something new. So we consume it, we digest it, we add our own originality, and then we create something new, whether it's via an essay, a YouTube video, whatever it may be. So human civilization has always functioned this way. When the first man invented fire and taught others how to do it, that's how they learned to start a fire. When you saw the hieroglyphics on rocks and other people explained what those drawings meant, that's how we learn. Learning itself has always been a derivative of the collective, of others, and original at the same time. So the question becomes, what exactly changed with AI? Is it really stealing? Is it really different than human learning? And we have to look at what AI does. So AI amplifies things. It scales things. It makes things quicker. It has much larger volume than a human individual brain can consume, right? It's industrialized synthesis or industrialized learning. That's the shift. That's the only substrate of change is the scale in which the information is being learned. And once you realize that, the pathology underneath these lawsuits begins surfacing immediately, such as Britannica, for example, encyclopedia. What does encyclopedia do? It collates information from other sources, and what do the sources get in return? A citation. Do they get a monetary reward? I don't think so. I'm not sure, but I would argue they probably don't. So the patient is not reacting to cognition itself. The patient is reacting to the collapse of knowledge and power asymmetry. Now let's look at what I mean by collapse of knowledge and power asymmetry. Historically, institutions controlled information scarcity through universities, publishers, credentials, seminars, books, academic hierarchies, and professional bottlenecks like experts. You needed funds in order to be able to participate in any of those. Not anyone can attend a university or purchase certain books or even obtain certain credentials. So knowledge asymmetry created authority. Those with the knowledge were considered intelligent, were considered to be the authority on certain subjects. So authority creates economic leverage. If I know more than you, knowledge is power, right? Then I can control. It also created the ability to access information from an economic perspective because I was able to sell multiple books. I was able to have multiple seminars. Now, what AI is doing is it destabilizes the scarcity of information itself. It makes it and serves it to everyone that can access an AI model. So suddenly, synthesis, which in other words is learning, becomes scalable. Now everyone has access to university level information, to books that may be out of their reach. It allows people at every class to be able to access information equally. Now, one thing is important to note here is that data, information, and knowledge are not the same thing as wisdom. They're not the same thing as our own individual consciousness, and they're definitely not judgment. It's only synthesis, it's only information that's been captured and patternized or collated in such a way, depending on the question or the prompt you ask, it serves that information back to you. So, who controls knowledge distribution in the age of AI now? It balanced the equation, didn't it? Because there is a power shift that's occurring. Because, like I said, historically, knowledge was gated, right, through these particular entities. So, knowledge asymmetry created that gating to information. So, if you look at that, I think that right now, what you could see, other than the lawsuits that are currently happening by different entities against OpenAI and Meta and Anthropic and some of the others, you can already see when it comes to universities, which were the main source of knowledge, expertise, and information, you could see universities adapting quietly. They're doing it very quietly. Other than, for example, there's a learn rights effort, a proposal that's currently held by MIT, Cornell, and George Washington University, where they want to create a licensing structure for copywriting information. Because if AI can synthesize information understanding cheaply, then informational possession itself becomes less economically differentiating. Now, those institutions that previously held that knowledge and that expertise no longer hold that authority economically, or even authority in a sense of expertise response, right? Being able to get people's opinions to drive towards what they're thinking, because now we have access to all of it and we can make our own decisions and our own conclusions. So how are universities adapting? They're not adapting necessarily through collapsing registration overall. I looked at their data for multiple universities and I could tell that they're steadily keeping the same number of registration over the past 10 years or so. But I did notice a pattern that looks at the admission rates. So it seems to be a filtration that's happening as to which individuals get accepted to the colleges to begin with. Before everyone was accepted, or the majority, there were higher admission rates, I should say. Let me correct that. There were higher admission rates previously than they are showing now. So why is that filtering becoming more selective around differentiation of quality of cognition itself? Because I think that institutions and some of the others are beginning to realize something profound. If data, information, and even knowledge production becomes abundant, which it is, what actually is valuable now? If knowledge and authority are abundant, who actually remains valuable? Two things are going to become extremely important as we move forward in the AI era. I think it's going to be judgment and coherence. The ability to contextualize complexity across domains. And this is why I think the future economy becomes less about raw intelligence and more about the sound judgment under complexity. That's the real autopsy finding so far. Now, to be clear, I want to make sure I'm very clear about this. There is a difference between learning and infringement. And in order to understand those two different things, you have to understand what a creator is. I highly recommend looking up the definition of a creator. What is a creator? And if you had to prove you created something, you would have to prove it was your idea and it was exactly yours and it was original thought or a true expression, a unique expression of that knowledge, synthesis, and learning expressed. So then it's yours, right? But if we were to license knowledge and how we convert it to information, doesn't that seem like you would have to prove original thought? How do you prove original thought? I don't even think, well, I'm not sure, but I don't even think copyright does that. I think copyright looks at the unique expression of something. So that's a very distinct line. But if we were to raise it up a little bit and look at infringement versus learning, those are much clearer if you look at them as a human perspective. So, for example, there are legitimate infringement questions. For example, if AI reproduces copyrighted material verbatim and serves it to users verbatim from a book, verbatim from an article that's already been published, that's absolutely infringement, right? If companies obtain data sets illegally through piracy or the torrenting of books that's currently happening, right? Those seem to me like they are infringement, very clear infringement. So those are real distinctions, but they are not the same thing as learning itself. And this is where the patient's ontology begins destabilizing. Scale does not automatically alter ontology of learning. What is learning? It doesn't alter that. The scale doesn't alter that. If I were to consume 100 books myself because I'm a super brain, it doesn't make me a copyright infringer because I read it myself. So the printing press, for example, scaled on information. The intranet scaled information. Industrialization with machines scaled labor. What AI did is scale synthesis. That's the actual structural shift. Now, if you do verbatim reproduction, that's infringement. Pirated acquisition, that's infringement. Transformative training, if it transformed the information, I would think that is the same as learning. Memorization, which they call leakage of memorization, I would think that's copying. I'm just thinking about it from a perspective of a human being, right? So our cognitive discomposition findings say the patient appears unable to separate economic destabilization from synthesis transformation, which in essence is learning. Meaning the system feels threatened economically and interprets that threat as though reality itself has changed, learning itself has changed. But what actually changed was scarcity. Information is now available to everyone a prompt way. Whether it's accurate or not is a different discussion, but the information is available. And underneath all of this sits the real civilizational and economic question. What remains uniquely valuable once synthesis itself becomes industrialized? I don't think the answer is more information. I think the answer increasingly becomes judgment and coherence and meaningful human differentiation under complexity. That's where I think all of this is actually heading. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you would like a free PDF copy of the difference between learning and infringement, just in case you need to debate someone that's cognitively dead, click the link below and you can download a copy of your own just in case you need to debate that. So let me know if you have any questions, put them down below. Oh, geez. Oh, okay. It's even now. Bye.